I'll bring you. Awesome. Let me say welcome to everybody who's here. I'm excited to have you. Give me one moment so I can get my team into the webinar, and then we're going to get started. All right. Wonderful. So my folks are joining the call. We are going to get started because this is a great topic. This is an important topic, and the recording is on. If you find that you've got questions, feel free to pop them in the chat so my team can get to them, and we can definitely respond to any of the questions that you might have. Use the QA or the chat button, but I'm excited to have you here. My name is Anne Marie. I am a chief of staff at Microsoft, and this is one of my favorite topics to talk about. I love helping people understand the role of a chief of staff. And then we're going to have a little bit of an interactive moment towards the end because we're going to talk about the history of AI and prompt engineering and ways that you can utilize it today. So it's not something that next job you can use or it's future setting. I want you to be able to use it today. And so I'm very excited to share this with you. What we're going to talk about for the next little while is my blueprint. It's not advice. It's what I've done to get myself in a position where I can be a strategic operator and work as a chief of staff. And many people fall into this camp. They come from a variety of different backgrounds and they want to understand, am I actually already doing the work of the chief of staff? And if I am, what are the things that I need to do so I can get into that role, so I can get that title, so I can get that pay? And so what we're going to discuss is, what do most chief of staffs do? And it's going to be agnostic of industry. So it doesn't matter if you're working in tech, finance, education, healthcare, entertainment. There are some core skills that every chief of staff needs to know how to do. And so you may already be exhibiting a lot of these things. And so as a chief of staff from Microsoft, these are some of the things that I use as my best practices. I'm also the founder of my own company, Own Your Power with Anne Marie, where I coach people into strategic operator roles. And one of those roles is the chief of staff role. And so if this is something that is of interest to you, you'll have an opportunity at the end of the call to connect with me, and we can jump on a call and talk about your career and what are the things that you need to do to pivot into this specific field. Now, for me, this is really fun. This is the fun part because you get to create your executive brand. You may not think or know that you have an executive brand, but that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about the things that help you become a strategic operator, that have you show up and you can own your voice. You can literally own your power. I'm going to talk to you about how I've navigated in the C-suite, how I showed up in rooms that weren't necessarily built for me or people that look like me. How do you bring your whole self into those rooms? I will talk to you about setbacks and accomplishments, victories, the things that help motivate me, the things that are my why, that help me move forward. I lead with vulnerability. And so we're going to talk about ways that you can lead with vulnerability and be comfortable in the thing that you're doing. I want to help you transform how you lead. So it's not about a job. It's really about being the kind of leader that when you walk in the room, people know that you're there and they're listening and they take note. So the one big thing that I want you to get after being on this call is your blueprint. How do you become your executive's most trusted advisor? Because that's what we want to be. And you're going to be powered by AI, but also human intelligence. And that's really important. So when we get to the AI section, like I said, we're going to talk a lot about the history of AI, where it started, where we are today, what are the things that they're doing in the future, and how you can utilize it today. So you can go from being just a taskmaster to a strategic thought partner. You go from operating behind the scenes, because that's what I do all day, is operating behind the scenes, but then I'm owning my own seat at the table. So when I show up, I have a voice and I can make a difference. Do you find that you are sometimes drowning in operations? I want to help you lead with confidence. I want you to know that you are here right now because now you're going to get the tools to sustain the type of growth that you want in your career. And I created this because I didn't have it for myself. And I thought, if I can create something like this for myself, why not share it with others? And that's what I've done. This isn't just training, this is a moment of leadership for you. And so I am extremely honored and grateful that you are going to share the next little while with me. And like I said, I've got my team on the call. So if you've got questions, or every now and then I forget to share my screen because I'm popping in and out, let me know so I can make sure that you're seeing everything that we're talking about. So let's go ahead and get started. I want to talk to you about who this training is for. It's for the person who is everything to everyone, but they feel unseen. It's for that person who's always holding the team together. But then you ask yourself, can I do this long term? Is this really sustainable for me? It's for the person who, and I've done this many times, you walk into a room, you listen to people discussing the topic of the day, you have some ideas, you don't say anything, and then somebody else says your idea and you think, I should have spoken up. It's for that person who has the ideas, but they might lack the confidence to express it in a way that helps them feel present and in the moment. It's for the person who wants to lead boldly, but they don't want to lose their souls in the process. And so I've created a space for you and for me, and we're going to have a good time. Now, let me tell you who this is not for. If you want a quick fix, this is not for you. If you want something very surface level, just to kind of get you through the day, this is not for you. If you don't want to go deep, this is not for you. If you look at AI and you think this can replace me, so I don't want to think critically, again, this is not the place for you. This is not for folks who want to stick with the status quo. I want folks here who want to challenge everything, who want to build bridges, and who are what I call big vision thinkers. You see the big picture and you want to implement it. So let me tell you a little about who I am. My name is Anne Marie. I'm a chief of staff. I have had an opportunity to work at some amazing organizations. And so the reason I share that is because I want you to understand the perspectives that I bring to the table and why I bring the perspectives that I do to the table. So spent a lot of time in tech, entertainment, in automotive. Last year, I wrote a book about being a chief of staff. I had a wonderful reception, and I'm in the process of writing my second book, and I will complete my third book a few years later. I am a trilogy nerd, and so I want to write a trilogy about being a chief of staff. So stay connected with me because I'm going to make sure that you have the first peek at being at this book. So now I want to share with you why I'm doing this and who I'm doing this for. Now, before I ever had the title of a chief of staff, I was already holding organizations together. That was just the thing that I did. I was the person that they would turn to when things went wrong, and they'd say fix, and I would go and figure out how to fix it. I just kept things together. I'm a daughter of immigrants, and I'm a woman of faith. I learned very early how to lead without having a roadmap. And I think a lot of you may relate to that. You're given something to do, but you just got to figure it out. And every now and then I would ask myself the question, is there room for somebody like me at the table? And oftentimes I would be in rooms where I was the only, whether it was the only woman, the only Black woman, but I didn't see faces that looked like mine. And I needed to make sure that the impact that I brought to the room was impact that was lasting, and that I needed to build a brand that was a strong brand. I remember former President Obama said, everyone's trying to get a seat at the table, and when you get a seat at the table, you realize the people that are there ain't all that. And so I want to help you. If you want that seat at the table, let's get you at that table. Or maybe just create your own table, because that's what I'm doing. I am creating my own table because what I feel is necessary is not out there. I remember working for an organization, And they would always give me the hard projects, the really difficult, gnarly projects. And I would go and I would do them and I would execute them. And I remember one day, because it was a very flat organization, and I told my manager, I said, you keep giving me all these gnarly projects, but I don't get a bonus. I don't get a title change. I want something. I want a team. And so he uh, said, yep, let's give you a team. And my first team, I had 17 people that reported to me. I created standard operating procedures. I explained to the executives how they work with my team, how my team will work with them if there's a problem. I created the entire ecosystem, my center of excellence. On one of my last projects, it was with one of our enterprise clients, and we were signing a contract with them. And the account manager came to me and said, you're really good. Have you ever thought about coming and working on, for us? And I'm like, no, I'm happy where I am. And he said, you should think about it because I think you could have a really bright future. And I thought about it some more, and I decided, you know what, why not take a chance? Let me go and work in this other organization. And I started interviewing. Well, the account manager had a conversation with the CTO. And he said, yeah, we're trying to get Anne Marie. And the CTO, I'll never forget this, said to him, you can take anybody, but leave Anne Marie. And I thought, that's really interesting. They understood my value. They knew what I was bringing to the table, but they weren't necessarily paying me what I was worth. And so I learned how to move through corporate spaces. These are some of the things that I share with a lot of the people who are my clients. How do you move through those spaces when you feel like you're overlooked, you're dismissed, you're told to wait your turn? And so I would listen, I would observe, and I studied how power would work, and then I would implement it for myself. And that's where I would step in as a chief of staff and executive leader of multiple companies. And now, like I said, the CEO of my own company, I finally found a role that matched the work that I loved. And it's something that I've been doing for years. It wasn't flashy. I was able to hold people accountable with grace and empathy. It was foundational. It was strategy, but with heart. I was protecting time. I was challenging with love, and I was making leaders better by being by their side. So as I was building this place, I thought, what about others like me, like I had said earlier? And so I want you to think about this question. Have you ever felt like you had to perform a version of leadership that wasn't really you? And how did you feel? And what did that cost you? Um, what does it mean for you to really be seen at work? And how did it feel? Have you ever been the most qualified person in the room, but you're still overlooked? How did you respond to that? And what did you learn about yourself? And so we're going to talk about coaching, executive coaching. We're going to talk about the Chief of Staff Academy and the tools and the things that you need to be successful. The thing that I really wanted back then is that I wanted to be seen and heard. Not because I could handle these critical and difficult projects, but because I could lead in a way that didn't require me to harden or perform, and I could still hold on to my values while still being very powerful. I wanted to be that person who led without compromising herself. And so creating a space for people like me who may not have followed a traditional path into the executive suite, nonetheless, they're in the executive suite. I didn't want just the seat at the table. I wanted to reshape the table. I wanted to make it different. I wanted to make it inclusive, and I wanted to be in a situation where I could guide my destiny and the destiny of others. And that's what we're going to talk about. I didn't want to quiet quit with the jobs that didn't satisfy me. I didn't want to be upset and angry. And honestly, you can only take so many vacations in a year. But I wanted to be in a space where I could create authentically. I could lead with power, and I could see the impact that I was having. I love teaching people about this space. I love it so much. And I'm excited for you to be in this space with me. And so I want to dive into the Chief of Staff. What is a Chief of Staff? Well, you might be the person who's behind the scenes, you're fixing everything. and you don't really have a path forward. You're already doing half of the work as your chief of staff. If you're creating space for people and nobody's creating space for you, that's something that you need to think about. If you think about all the work that you're doing, what's one thing you wish you could say no to, but you don't feel like you have that option? Understanding your voice and your power, you can be in a position where you have that option. I want you to stop doing it the hard way. I want you to let somebody who's actually walk this path with you. And I want you to think about specifically what is it that you want to get at the end of this series. And so let's transform our time together. Like I said, get the seat at the table. I'm going to teach you a framework that will work. And as much as possible that you can future-proof your career, I want to help you future-proof your career as much as possible. People who implement these things in the program, they find that it gives them a leg forward. They're able to do a whole lot more with their time, and they're finding joy and satisfaction in their day and the things that they're doing. So let's just start at the beginning. Let's talk about, what is a chief of staff? What do you know that a chief of staff does? And what are the terms that are mostly associated with that role? We always hear strategic operator. What is a strategic operator? What do they do? How can you operate as a strategic operator? Well, the strategic operator, the first thing that they've got to do is build trust. You have to establish credibility with your executive, and you have to be reliable and do it through discretion. And so finding ways to build that trust is key. One of the ways that I find that I build trust with my executives, like I said earlier, is sometimes I have to be vulnerable first. I had a situation with one of my corporate vice presidents who was bringing on a development coach that he had worked with for a very long time. And he had his team work with it. And I'd only been on the team for about 2 months. And he said, hey, I want to bring this person back in, have them help us out because development is important. And I love that it was so important to my executive. And so I went and I had a conversation with this person, and I wasn't quite feeling that it was a right fit. And so I went to my HR partner, who I was very close to, and I said, we're thinking about bringing somebody on, but I've got some questions. And she gave me some great advice. She said, go and just survey the people that worked with this coach in the past. And so I had about 90% of the leaders who provided me with some feedback. I asked them all the same questions, and I told them, I will not use your name. I just need to get some themes that I can share with our leader, because I think we need more options. And unanimously, nobody wanted to work with this coach again. Imagine how I felt. I'm the newest person on the team. Nobody wants to work with the coach. And my first project is bring on this coach. I went to my executive. I had data, I had information, I had done some homework, and I said, I want to talk to you about this coach. However, I have anxiety. This is me leading out with vulnerability. I have some anxiety because I think the message that I have is not going to match the message that you've heard. And he said immediately, I don't want you to have anxiety. I need you to share with me because you're my number two. I need to be able to turn to you, and I am not a yes person. And so we had a very candid conversation about this coach, and I had 2 backups for him to consider. After all of this, we ended up going with one of the backups and not his coach. And he realized that he had some bias that he needed to let go, and was grateful that I challenged him on something that was fairly small, but still something that would impact the team. And so you have to be able to lead out with vulnerability and see if they're going to respond with vulnerability. And if they're not, there's tactics around that to make sure that you protect yourself and your safety. But the chief of staff and executive role is such a tight-knit role that you need to have that bond with your executive where you're working together. So you want to build that trust. You're protecting their time. You need to understand what is important to them and what are the things that can be delegated to somebody else. And it's not that you're necessarily managing their calendar, but you understand where their priorities are, and you can step in and run point. You can have the leadership team run point, and you can filter the information that your executive needs. By doing things like this, you're staying 2 steps ahead and making sure that you understand what's important to your team, the goals, and the potential roadblocks that you might have. All of these things are helping you build this relationship with your executive, and it becomes very two-way. And then you can have that honest and candid conversation about the things that you may not agree with, that executive may not agree with, but it's causing you to grow closer so you can achieve the goals and the visions of the organization and the team. So that's one way of being a strategic partner. The other thing is, do you manage a lot of executive relationships? Do you know how your team moves? How do people want to receive information? This is super important. Understanding working styles. I had an executive who said, you need to at me in every email, because at the end of the day, I pull up everything that I have added and I respond to those. I didn't know. That was very interesting to me. So understand their working styles, establishing that clear communication. When I had a team, I told them I was available on Teams all of the time. And so when I would reach out to somebody, I would preface a lot of things and say, this is not urgent. I have a question or something. So when they saw what was coming to them from me, it put them at ease, or at least set the tone for what is this message and what is my response time need to look like. The other thing is developing trust through consistency. You've got to be consistent. And it's important to be consistent because when you have an oops or gotcha moment, all of a sudden it's not, oh no, Anne-Marie messed up. It was, this isn't like Anne-Marie. Let's see what we need to do to support her because something seems awry. And so you've got to be consistent. And then this is how you start to become that strategic thought partner. The other area is cross-functional leadership. And this is a big one because you are dealing with a variety of individuals all of the time. So organizational navigation is so important because you've got to understand who are your stakeholders, what roles do they play, when do they need to be pulled in, when do they just need to be informed, and how are they supporting the vision and the mission of the team. So if you're dealing with a variety of stakeholders, again, you're already operating in the capacity of a chief of staff. Team alignment is so important because, again, as I've worked with my executives, understanding everybody's focus, it gave me an up in when things were happening, how could I bring people together and ensure that the right people were involved in the discussions. A big one is conflict resolution. If you are not comfortable in conflict, chief of staff role might be tough for you. But if you are already that person who is helping mediate disagreements in a diplomatic manner, this is the path for you because you've got to understand what's going on and engaged with love and compassion and empathy. The term read the room. You have to be able to look at what's going on in the room, understand the temperature in that room, and adjust or bring them around if things start to get too spicy or hot. Again, as you are being a cross-functional leader, becoming that executive liaison are all of the things that are helping you embrace that skill. The final area that I wanted to talk about was strategic initiative management. Again, this is a part that is so important, and you may be finding that you're doing this already with your teams. When you are defining strategies, this is the framework that I use. Make sure that there is a clear vision. We understand the why and what is the potential outcome. Stakeholders, who needs to be involved? This is where you look at having either a race seat or a day seat, where you are providing roles and responsibilities, because it's very easy for the chief of staff to say, well, I'm going to do everything. You won't get very far. It's better to work with a team, delegate what needs to happen, and ensure that the work that you're doing stays on track. So making sure that you're utilizing and working with the resources effectively and properly. And that's where you drive the execution. You're coordinating everything that's happening. You're seeing the end game. And when you see something is deviating, you raise the alarm so people can get back on course. The final thing is measuring that impact. Are you going to accomplish the thing that you set out for? If not, why? And what are the things that need to happen to either accomplish that thing or put it to bed and say, you know what, we started down this path and we're realizing this isn't the path that we want to go down, and taking a different direction. This is the part that I love to share with folks, because there's no traditional way into the chief of staff role. I was a project manager and I did a little stint in sales, and then I moved into the business management role, and then I became a chief of staff. The entry points are just a variety of different ways. I'm working with a client right now who is a senior executive assistant, and she's going through the Chief of Staff Academy so she can build her skills, so she can have the knowledge, the backing, the foundation to feel confident to step into a Chief of Staff role. And so there's many, many ways to move into this role, and it is not something that is unattainable for you. If you want it, I can help you attain it. Role mastery, that's the thing that is so important. How do you sharpen your skills? There are many ways to be able to gain the education and the knowledge. And that's why I said one of the things that I offer is the Chief of Staff Academy, which is an accredited program that takes you through the foundational aspects of being a chief of staff and gives you the skills so you can step into that space with confidence and exuberance. And then future paths. Many years ago, being a chief of staff was a very transitional role. You'd step into it, you do it for a couple of years, and you move off and do something else in the organization. Today, you're finding people who are in this role for a long time. For example, I'm a person who I've chosen to embrace this role and create a business out of this role. The history of the chief of staff is very interesting. Napoleon was actually the first individual that stood up a chief of staff. And he put a man in charge of his staff, literally. So while he was running the front lines and thinking about strategies, he worked with the chief of staff to make sure those strategies were delivered to his team, but that person was in charge of that organization. We've seen it translate and change, where now you see the chief of staff in tech, you see it in finance, you see it in all swaths of different industries. And so the chief of staff really can launch your next career, your trajectory with what you want to do, if you understand how to do that role and how to do it well. So what's next? I've talked a little bit about the chief of staff, the different roles and the things that you can do. The chief of staff is literally everything that you see on this screen. That person is working as a manager, an operator. Am I still sharing my screen? Yes, thank you so much. It looked like it went away for a second. They are operating as a lead, a director, all of these things the chief of staff is doing. And that's something that you need to be aware of and recognize as you are moving ahead in your career. This next part that I want to talk to you about is AI and the chief of staff. And how do we utilize what we know about AI today, especially if you are on the job hunt, you're a job seeker, or you just want to learn a little bit more about AI. So I want to take you through a little bit of the history of AI, and then we're going to do some exercises. Now, I did not know this, but AI started back in the 40s. This was education for me, because I thought AI was this thing that just started in the last, 20 years. But it started back in the 1940s and 1950s. And it was very interesting. A gentleman named Alan Turing wanted to see if humans could discern if they got a response, whether it came from a human or a computer. And so he created this thing called the Turing test. And he wanted, again, to see how to differentiate these things. And he wrote a paper called Computing Machinery and Intelligence. And there's a lot of the people who are in the AI space who are using this as their foundational start to AI. And so you need to be able to understand a little bit about Alan Turing and the things that he was doing. He created this model, and it's important. Why? Because it's introducing the topic of neural networks and why this is important. And this is before any AI actually existed. So you might be asking yourself, well, what is a neural network? I am not a technical person, but I wanted to understand this more fully. A neural network is a type of computer system that tries to work like the human brain. A simple way to think about it is if you're teaching a child to recognize pictures of cats and dogs, at first they're going to get it wrong. But over time, when they start to see a lot of pictures and examples, they get better at telling them apart. That's how a neural network works. It takes input, which is the photo, it passes it through layers of neurons, tiny decision makers, and then it looks for patterns to see what's similar, what's different, what is the same. And then it gives you an output. And just like a child, the more examples it gets, the smarter it gets. And so it's really important to understand this neural network, the history of the neural network, and why it was key in the beginnings of AI. So then we have the birth of AI. This happened at a Dartmouth conference where these gentlemen were reviewing Alan Turing's paper, and they coined the term AI, which is very interesting. And it started to get a little bit of legs. We talk about early progress in First Winter because as they're starting to see some success with AI, it's very costly and they're not getting funding. ELIZA is a very important milestone in AI. It was the first computer program designed to act like a person. So you might think of it as the great grandmother of chatbots. And what ELIZA did, ELIZA was programmed to think like a therapist. And so you would type into ELIZA, I feel sad today. And ELIZA would say, why do you feel sad? Now, it didn't understand the way AI does understand us today. It did pattern matching. It would use rules to flip around what you were saying to see if it could get to an answer. The reason it's important for you to understand ELIZA, it was the first computer program to actually simulate human-like response. Human-like. People started to get attached, even though ELIZA was just doing basic pattern matching. And so ELIZA is revolutionary. But again, because of the cost and everything that was going into it, it suffered its first winter. Then there was the second winter and more progress. There was more experimentation. But again, AI was just getting too costly. And because of lack of funding, it had its second winter. But then we look at today, the modern evolution of AI. And you've got, in 1997, Deep Blue. Deep Blue was a chess-playing computer developed by IBM. And this is funny because you'll think, of course, that makes sense. But Deep Blue was the first machine to defeat a reigning world-class champion using standard match conditions. Now, today that doesn't seem like it's a big deal, but back then that was a huge, huge deal. So then there was this infusion. People really wanted to get back into the AI world and understand. Then you've got the big data revolution where companies like Google, Amazon, Microsoft, all of them are now starting to build these machine learning modules. And we're going to talk a lot about these acronyms that you probably hear all the time to give you some context around them. But you've got deep learning, which is computers taking large swaths of information, crunching them, and providing responses. And so now machines could theoretically see and understand things much better. And it brought about this revolution, of AI. And it started to change. And then you've got today where we've got ChatGPT and NLP, which is natural language processing. And so we're going to go through a lot of these terms. Again, things just so you can understand and ground yourself. Because when we talk about AI, you understand what the chief of staff is doing, a strategic operator. You understand the role of AI. You can marry them together and see how it's going to save you time in the things that you're doing. So let's just understand AI. What is AI? AI is the simulation of human intelligence by machines, especially computer systems. And so it's gonna learn, which means it's acquiring data. It's gonna reason, which means it's using rules to process data, and then it's gonna self-correct. There's so many AI tools and platforms out there. And I just wanted to give you just a look at some of the ones that I use. Now, The more you use a specific platform, the better it starts to understand you. But I would encourage you to um, play around and test in as many platforms as possible to understand the types of results that you're getting based on the queries that you're putting in there, and and just to become well learned in the field of AI tools and platforms. So let's talk a little bit about some of this core terminology. AI. So artificial intelligence, it's the simulation of human intelligence by computer and machine. And so an example is Chat GPT answering your questions, or Netflix recommending shows based on your viewing habits. Then you've got machine learning, and this is a subset. It's really helping AI look at data and improve the result without explicit programming. So you think about Spotify, you think about Pandora. Over time, they start to recommend things according to what they're seeing your thumbs up liking. NLP, natural language processing. Now, this is the way that machines take data, they understand it, they interpret it, and they generate human language. And so the very popular ones are Siri or Alexa, and they're responding to your voice commands. And then the last one that I want you to make sure that you understand is LLMs, large language models. And that is large pieces of data. This is what we talked about earlier on, where as you are providing a prompt, it is providing you with the responses because it has a lot of information that it can fish for. And so it's generating these responses based on the data that it's received. And so you've got these LLMs who can write emails, they can summarize reports, and they can even create content for you. More terms that we're not going to go through deeply, but ones that you should understand are API, RPA, the rest that I've got on this form. The one that's really popular that we were hearing a lot about initially was text-to-speech, before we were able to have AI actually simulate human voice, and it didn't sound so robotic. So just some key terms that you should have in your back pocket as you are in the AI world. Now, there are some things that you should consider from an ethical perspective with AI. One is data privacy. As you're using these platforms, once you upload the data, it is game for anybody to access it. So within your organizations, they may have proprietary platforms that you can use to be able to use AI. Remember those areas. If you're okay with sharing your information, again, like I said, just be aware that it's out there, and be mindful of the prompts that you are utilizing to get your response. Transparency and disclosure. A lot of organizations now they want to know, are you using AI to answer questions or do a variety of things? I use AI every day in my work because it helps extend my time. And so it's something that you'll want to be mindful of as you are using AI, to be transparent about how you use it. Bias and hallucinations. AI will give you a response and it will say it with the highest level of confidence. My husband was taking some certifications, and it was open book. He was allowed to use anything to help him pass this test. And so he would go into AI and see if he could get a response. And AI would give him an answer, and he and I would troubleshoot that, and it was dead wrong, wrong, wrong. But AI's level of confidence was extremely high. So the last point that I make here about human judgment is so important. You cannot trust blindly everything that AI puts out there. You have to validate. You've got to go to the source, make sure it's a credible source, and human intelligence and judgment is still so important and key. Let's jump into, how do chief of staffs actually use AI, and why is prompt engineering so important? The way that I use AI, meeting efficiency. AI will scribe my notes, capture my action items, and then even provide questions that may not have been asked, that should have been asked in the meeting. It saves me hours of just manual work. It will also do scenario planning. If I have a situation that I've got to solve, I can do what ifs, and it will give me different options on how I could solve that problem. Communication is huge. Everybody likes to use AI for communication. It will draft your emails, internal memos, any executive correspondence. You can create the template of the communication and then fill it in as you have more context. And then with strategic documents, AI can actually review those documents, give you the high points, the things that you need to be aware of, and summarize it for you. This is a really exciting aspect of AI, the fact that it can help you summarize the information. And so let's talk about a framework. Let's talk about why prompt engineering is so, so important. What is a prompt? A prompt is a clear instruction, a question, or a statement. And it's designed to initiate a response or guide your thinking or trigger an action. So in very simple terms, the prompt tells someone, like AI, what they want them to do. So in a conversation, a prompt can be, what are your thoughts on this? That's encouraging a response or a reply. In writing, a prompt could be, write about a time that you overcame a challenge. That sparks a little bit of storytelling. You can give instruction for a prompt. Summarize this text in 3 business points. There's many, many things that prompt engineering can help you do as you are doing your work. So this is the framework that I use when I'm creating a prompt. And we are going to create prompts and see the types of responses that we get back. First, you've got to give it structure, and it's got to be clear. You need to make sure that it understands what you're asking it to do. Then you want to have context and a goal. What is this for? What are you trying to accomplish? Sometimes you will have to outline the steps. Step 1 is this, step 2 is that, and then do this. And then you're just going to write the task. And then we're going to talk about personas, simulating a persona and what that looks like. So what exactly is a persona? A persona is it's a fictional representative of a type of person. So, and it's based on real data. So it can help you make decisions. So in this example, we talk about a persona is a financial analyst. That's a real role. A persona could be a chief of staff. And so you want to provide it with a persona or the audience that's going to be responding to the thing and the application of that thing. So now let's talk about how do you write the task. You want to be very specific. Do we have a question? Oh, okay. You want to be very specific and clearly state what is it that you want the AI to do. You also want to be concise. You're going to use direct language and don't use filler words. I think it was earlier this year that OpenAI said using words like please and thank you actually hinders the quality of the response, which is interesting, but you want to be mindful of the types of words that you're using. And then you want to be very actionable. What is the thing that you want, and how are you going to write it down? Now, when we talk about breaking down the steps, sometimes you do have things that are very complex. And so you want to make sure that you provide a clear sequence. You prioritize it in the order that you want the responses received. So when you get your response, you're getting something that provides you with a starting point with whatever you're doing. The interesting thing about prompts is you might spend 10, 15 minutes creating that prompt. But if you create a really good prompt, the response quality is so high. And so I spend time teaching people how to write good prompts instead of saying, here are my top prompts. Because if you know how to write a good prompt, you're able to access numerous things with AI. When we talk about context and goals, these are the elements in both of those areas. Understanding your audience. Is there background information? Are there constraints? I need this to be 200 words. And is there industry specifics? And then the goal setting. What's the outcome? What's the thing that you want? What are the success metrics? And what is the desired output? And so what we're going to do, I'm showing you this example. My team is on. We are going to actually run this prompt. And so I'm going to stop sharing this screen, and I'm going to go to another screen. And I'm going to encourage you to open up an AI platform of your choice. So it doesn't matter which one it is, but just open up an AI platform and we're going to run this prompt in the platform. So let me I'm going to grab my paper so I can paste it in for you. My team will go ahead and paste it in the chat for you. And so the first thing we're going to do is we want to our persona is act like an experienced HR writer. And we're not going to hit enter after any of these. You're just going to do a comma. So I posted in act as an HR writer. The task is create a remote work policy. So again, we're going to go ahead and post that in the chat, post that in the prompt box, but don't hit enter because we've got more. The steps. Remember, we talked about making sure that you provide enough context for it. So the next step is define the eligibility, if there's equipment requirements, anything else that can help writing this policy. Context. This one, we are going to do it as industry specific. So all of this, I want you to go ahead and type it into the AI platform of choice for you. And then the last thing that we're going to do is give it some structure. How do we want it to look? So we've got everything in here and we're going to hit enter. And now what's happening is that it is writing this policy for us. The awesome thing about this is that as an HR person, I now have a foundation. I have something that I can start with. I can correct the things that don't make sense. I can cater it to what I'm doing with my job, what makes sense. And I can add information that may not have been added there before. And it just kicked it out in 2 seconds. Instead of spending half a day writing this up, I've actually started with the framework of this particular prompt. I hope that is helpful. We've got another prompt that we're going to play with, and we've got it's in the chat, and let's just go ahead and just write a simple and friendly prompt. Not a lot of information. We just want to start to play around with AI. So this one is, help me write a professional bio for LinkedIn. I work in project management, and I want it to sound confident, but not too formal. So this is the prompt. It's pulling from my information, and it's written me something that was fairly simple. It can look at what you are, what your role is, and do the same thing. The next prompt that we've got in the chat I want you to grab is act as a communications coach. And we're giving it a little bit more specificity here. I want 3 paragraphs, and I want it as a chief of staff, I want it so I'm applying for a tech startup, and what will that look like? So this one's a little bit more nuanced. So it's giving you a little bit more information, but it's giving you exactly what you're looking for. 3-paragraph elevator pitch for a chief of staff applying for a job in a startup. Again, these are just examples of how you can start to look at prompts and create them in a manner that makes the most sense for you. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing because we're going to jump into another screen. I hope that you're finding this useful and that these are things that you can actually apply in your work every day. We talked a little bit about writing emails. All right, I've got my next screen. Because we have a limited amount of time, I want to share with you some of the other things that you can do. We're not going to do it right now. If you want to get some help on how to do these other things, my calendar is in the chat. Feel free to set up time with me because you can actually review a strategic document. You can tell it to help you understand it so for me, one of the areas that I struggled with was understanding finances. And so I could tell AI, help me understand this as a novice to the finance world, and it would break it down. It also will take large pieces of data and just help you crunch through that data. Super helpful. And then creating digital twins. You want it to have different personas within the AI platform that you're using so it can respond accordingly. So these are just some things that you can actually do when you're utilizing AI. The other thing I wanted to hit on is how can a job seeker actually leverage AI. And these are all of the areas that we can leverage AI. We're only going to hit one right now, which is resume optimization. And so we're going to stop sharing again. And I'm going to switch screens really quickly. And I want you to open up LinkedIn or any place that has jobs. And let me share my screen again. Screen 3, there we go. And I'm going to click on jobs. And I'm just going to pick the first one that shows up. This is the job that we're going to work with. So you've got your platform open. And because there is such a mad dash for jobs right now, literally you've got hundreds of people applying for a job. We're in a position where we've got to almost cater our resumes to the job. And that can seem like a daunting task. But let me show you how you can utilize AI to help you do it quickly. We are going to, first of all, add our resume. Don't hit enter. And if you're not comfortable adding your resume, my team will add a sample resume that you can utilize. But I'm going to take a resume that I've already got ready, and we're going to attach it. We're not going to do anything with it, though. We're just going to attach it right now. Now we're going to go back to the job, and there's no fast way to do this, so we're going to be a little clunky. We're just going to grab the details of this job. We're not going to post it yet. We're going to go back to the job, and we're going to say, modify my resume to match the job description with bypassing ATS and show me the before and after and the why of each change. Now, I'm telling it something very specific to do. I'm going to hit period, and then I'm going to post the job description in there. Now it has my resume, it has the job, and I've given it a specific prompt. I want you to look at my resume and see how you can adjust it so it can match the job. I always want to know the before and after because I may not agree with how it's changing my resume. And here you have a detail on why it's making the changes. And sometimes it makes changes that are far-fetched. So you need, again, like I said, that human eye on what's going on to make sure that it is actually representing you properly. And it's telling me, why is it doing this? ATS, which is the resume systems that screen out instead of screening in. Now you've got a different resume, and you can actually tell it to create the new resume in Word, and it will create a new resume in Word for you. And because we have the systems that are just checking for keywords, a lot of coaches encourage people, do not do something fancy and pretty in your resume. Just make sure that it's hitting on those bullet points to help you secure that job. And so I'm going to stop sharing for 1 second, and we're going to go back to my original screen around how you can utilize AI to help you. So that was resume optimization. It can help you with cover letters. It can help you with interview prep, asking you questions. As you are researching the company, it can help you have a perspective on the organization. And so you can show up in a manner, again, that strengthens your position. And finally, with LinkedIn and networking, it will help you in both of those spaces as you are wanting to be a differentiator and stand out with the things that you're doing. I hope that you have found this useful. I want to open it up to questions, but I also want to talk to you about some next steps. I've shared with you just a slice of what working with me as an executive coach can help you gain. There's the Academy enrollment for the Chief of Staff Academy, which will take you through those core skills. There are endless resources that I have available for you. Book a discovery call. Like I said, my team, everything has jumped. Book a discovery call with me. My team has put it in the chat for you to click on my calendar link or just scan the QR code and let's have a conversation. So I'm going to stop sharing for a moment now. And then I want to see, what questions do you have? Did you find this useful? Is there more information that you would like to have that can help you on your journey? And again, like I said, book some time with me. And let's connect, let's talk. So I'm going to go really quickly to the chat and see, do we have any questions? Is there something burning that you'd like to know? If there's not, I'm looking at my wonderful participants, Chantel, Alexandria, Danielle, Fania. Thank you for spending your evening with me. I'm going to hang on until the top of the hour because, again, like I said, I'd love to hear if you've got any questions. I'm going to unmute all of your names. And so if you wanted to come off of mute to ask a question, I'm happy to hear. If not, and this has been all that you thought, again, like I said, thank you for spending the evening with me, and I look forward to being able to talk to you in the future. So I'm looking at my team. Do we have any questions? It looks like we may not have any questions, but like I said, I'll hang on. If not, thank you, everybody. You're welcome, Alexandria. It was a pleasure to have you on the call. All right, we're going to go ahead and stop recording, and thank you again.